everyone, and happy Wednesday. So, Tara, we already did a whole episode on the debate, but we were talking about how it's crystal clear they're going to replace Biden, and we both think it's Newsom. In fact, I am pretty certain it's going to be Newsom at this point. What about you?
Yeah, remember a few months back before Biden was solidified as the nominee and rumors started leaning toward Michelle Obama and like
Hmm.
Newsom kind of like faded out of the spotlight for a while after his world tour for climate change. But I was like, no, he is still going to slither into the White House somehow at the last minute and I 100% still believe that's true. And so I feel like we could sit here and we could wonder how could anyone possibly vote for this man after seeing what he's done to destroy California? And we can bring up all the numbers and the facts and the evidence to prove it. And if you guys want more information and you didn't listen to our deep dive California episode that we did a couple weeks ago, go listen to that because we spell it all out. Like California's economy is in the toilet with a $46.8 billion deficit. The cost of housing is one of the highest in the nation. So is their unemployment rate. Crime is the highest it's been in California since 2008. US Census data shows that over 817,000 people fled the state in 2022, another 350,000 left in 2023, and a recent consumer affairs analysis that came out this month has said another like 143,000 plus California residents are estimated to flee this year. Not to mention hundreds of companies that have left California during the past few years, including 11 Fortune 1000 companies like Tesla, Oracle, Charles Schwab, McKesson, and Hewlett Packard. Like, and we've talked about this multiple times, how Newsom has been on a rampage to destroy parental rights in California with his DEI and trans policies, and he's bankrupted companies with his climate agenda. So it's like, why the fuck would anyone vote for him, right? But then you have to think we have a whole population of like libtard sheep who are so brainwashed and deathly afraid of Trump that they will believe anything the MSM throws their way. And Newsom is like the Antichrist, but with a big smile and a fancy suit. And he's the perfect candidate to carry out the leftist agenda. Because if you look at his California policies, they basically just mirror the policies of the Biden admin. And Stephanie, look who's getting all the media attention right now after the debate as Biden's biggest supporter. It's not Obama, it's not Kamala, it's fucking Newsom.
Oh, yeah. I've been seeing clips coming out where right after the debate, inside CNN, where no one was supposedly allowed, like right on the debate stage, reporters are swarming Gavin Newsom. And I'm like, What? And he's just like smiling and they're just eating him up. And I'm like, what the fuck is the governor of California doing at a presidential debate in Georgia on the other side of the country? Like, why was he even there? And people were commenting on social media and they're like calling this Newsom's coronation ceremony, which is like totally how they're acting. And then he went on this like crazy media circuit. I mean, he was on like every major media outlet where he's using his charm to just reassure the American people that everything's great. And like it's totally predictive programming. Like, I think they're conditioning the public to expect Newsom to run. That way, everyone can like get all their feelings out before they officially announce it. That's my take.
Oh, yeah, it's exactly what you said, Stephanie. It's predictive programming. Because look at what's going on. It's not just that Newsom is, vocally claiming to support Biden. He's literally campaigning in place of Biden. He has plans to travel across the country to supposedly support the Biden campaign, campaigning for Biden. Like, no, even the San Francisco Chronicle, which is a pretty left leaning publication, they reported the other day that Newsom was, quote, mentally checking himself out of California and into the White House, end quote. So anyone who believes that Newsom's just being supportive of Biden's campaign has blinders on and needs to open their eyes. And we have to remember that Newsom is one of the elites. Stephanie, I know you've mentioned this several times on the podcast, how he's Pelosi's nephew. We know he's part of the ruling class that doesn't have to abide by the rules that he establishes for the people of his state. Remember back during COVID when he put California on lockdown and
Mhm.
people weren't allowed to go to restaurants or see their families? And then all these photos and videos surface of him laughing and having, a mask-free grand old time at dinner with a bunch of other elites at this fancy restaurant. And then when kids in California weren't allowed to attend school for like 2 fucking years, those rules didn't apply to Newsom because he sent his kids to an in-person private school where they undoubtedly were not masked in the classroom and now dealing with, severe disability problems. And it's like time and time again, he makes these terrible decisions for Californians, but he's so wealthy that he doesn't give a fuck about the people in his state. This is dictator behavior, rules for thee, but not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and while he was doing the media circuit after the debate, I caught a clip of Adam Carolla interviewing him. Do you remember Adam Carolla from like back in the day?
Oh my God, yes. I listened to him like since my God, since he was on a K-Rock radio show, like back when I was in high school.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's so funny, but like he is adamantly against Newsom. And so he was interviewing him, which was, obviously supposed to be about the debate. It was not about the debate. He just started calling him out on COVID lockdowns. And this is personal for him because he was one of the many people that fled California during those lockdowns that you just mentioned. And I think he was the only person that called out Newsom to his face in this whole media circuit instead of like playing the whole media game asking him about how the debate went. So I have the clip. So just take a listen to what Corolla says.
Yeah, I'm Corolla here. Governor, why did you shut the beaches in California during COVID? Yeah, I think we all were working on information at the time. We had no basis of deeply understanding the virus. I think they so did you didn't know anything. So why'd you shut the beaches? States like Florida. If you didn't know anything, why'd you shut the beaches? Well, we didn't know. Yeah, because people were concerned early in the pandemic. Information was coming out as it relates to how it was transferred, the disease. And people were cautious, trying to keep people alive. And I should say this: so I didn't let them go in the sunshine and get vitamin D and exercise. So you shut the beaches. Okay. And you arrested a guy who was paddleboarding in the bay. Health, wealth, and yeah. Any signs? Any signs? We're all geniuses and outdoor dining. We're all down outdoor dining. The debate tonight, it's not a debate. You shut down outdoor dining, you cancel businesses. It's nothing to do with science. All right, let me finish people out. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, like he was just like going at him, and Newsom's just sitting there smiling with his beautiful smile, like playing it off like, oh, haha, everything's fine. I mean, this guy.
I'm surprised they let Adam Carolla speak because he, like, again, like I said, I've listened to him for probably 20 years. And
Mhm.
even after I left California and I moved to Washington, I listened to his show throughout the pandemic. He was one of the few people who was openly defying the rules and speaking out and refusing to comply with Newsom's lockdown. And he was not afraid to talk about it on his podcast. And so it does not surprise me that he would bring it up. But the fact that Newsom wouldn't be expecting it, like he's been outspoken about this shit for years. And I do want to point out, though, that he still lives in California. He's got
Mm.
twins, and I think he's waiting for them to graduate from high school or something before he leaves, because he lives in an area where I'm very familiar with. And so I fucking love that he did that.
Yeah, I assumed he left California because I've
Mhm.
heard him talking about this
Oh yeah.
for, I mean, he's been very outspoken, and it's like good for him because there's so many celebrities that aren't, they say nothing about it and they just hide behind their like private schools and everything. And
He would like openly go on the podcast and he'd be saying about how he went on his hike today And this was like during the height of COVID when everything was shut down. And he's like, yeah, I was out there. I was hiking through the San Fernando Valley and blah, blah, blah. And just like flat out was like, I'm not complying with this shit. I'm going to do what I want to fucking do. And like, I love that guy.
We need more people like him. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because part of the reason I wanted to play that clip is because it shows Newsom like under pressure. And I mean, he is good. He
Yes.
never like gets angry and like yells. He smiles, he keeps his cool. So that's why people are going to vote for him. They're going to be like, oh, someone who's normal, that like is presidential and like good looking. Like literally there's people that are going to vote for him just for that. So that's what I worry about when it comes to Newsom.
Well, that's what's frightening is because he's such a good bullshitter. I mean,
He's like a
like I said,
psychopath.
yes,
He has no
exactly.
emotions.
Yep, exactly. Just does it with a smile on his face. And that's
Hmm.
why I said he fucking is better than Obama
Yeah.
because he never loses his composure, never loses the smile, never, you don't even see him break a sweat when he's being contested on something. He always has an answer.
Did you see him on Sean Hannity? Like it was not that long ago, like a few months ago. He did an interview. I guess he's like friends with Sean Hannity, who's like a Fox News host. But he like was talking like he loves conservatives and like he's their best friend. Like the guy is such a good bullshitter. It's scary because you actually are like, oh, I like he's very charismatic and he
Yes.
makes you think like he's this great guy. And like that's why I think like he's got to be a psychopath because then he turns around and does this like crazy shit. So anyhow, it's interesting, but I have an even more interesting theory. Okay. Here I go with my like crazy shit. This is my own. I didn't steal this from anyone. So you can blame me for the craziness. But I actually made a TikTok video on this a few months ago when Mike Johnson like first switched, where we realized like he went from being ultra conservative to all of a sudden like siding with the left as Speaker of the House. And we were like, I think the episode was even called like what the fuck happened to Mike Johnson or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
So I was like, I couldn't get it out of my mind. And I had this theory and I did a video and I said, what if Mike Johnson had meetings with the puppet masters, whoever's really in control of this White House? And they told him that just before the election, they'd get rid of Biden. And it really doesn't matter how, whether it's the 25th Amendment or Biden having an accident, they're going to, get rid of him. Like, let's just say, hypothetically, they tell him this. And that would mean that Kamala would become president and Mike Johnson would be next in line, unless they had a plan to force Kamala to step aside, which would make Mike Johnson president. Now, we've been hearing rumors of Kamala being left out of meetings with Obama. And yes, Obama supposedly had a closed door meeting with Biden at the White House. So they will likely push her aside. And as far of a stretch as that is, it would explain why Mike Johnson all of a sudden changed his views and went against like every promise he made as Speaker of the House because people do crazy things to get power. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because I was listening to Steve Bannon on Megyn Kelly's podcast, and they were talking about like how big of a national security risk this whole situation is post the debate. And they were saying that since the left keeps hinting at a new candidate, our adversaries are watching this and they're going to look at this as an opportunity to make a move before we get a new candidate in place. And they're just going to play on our weakness because right now it's basically exposed that we're weak and the commander in chief is not really in charge of anything. And so Bannon said something happened at the Pentagon with the top commanders, and he thinks that war is breaking out and that they'll like end up holding an emergency meeting to get rid of Biden. And we need someone competent in place for war. So, like, what if that person in the wings is Mike Johnson?
Okay. That is a fascinating theory and one that I have never thought of. And I- it's plausible. I mean,
Everyone on TikTok thought I was crazy. They were like, no, Mike Johnson's being threatened. And I was like, well, he could be being threatened or he could be bribed. He's either
Yeah.
threatened or bribed. It's one or the other.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on. But I have to jump in here for a second because like it's so fucking maddening to me that all of a sudden people are questioning Biden's competence and his ability to run the country. And, he's suddenly a national security threat. And I'm not referencing Steve Bannon or Megyn Kelly because they both believe this and have been saying it for a while, just like we have. But I think the American public should be so fucking livid that our federal government really thinks that we're stupid enough to believe that Biden has been anything remotely close to competent for the past 3 years. And that it wasn't until the debate that he all of a sudden becomes a national security risk and a concern. And like, in terms of global politics and power plays that are it's not something new. This shit's been taking place around the world, all the puzzle pieces falling together because of Biden's weakness and incompetence. The entire world has watched him deteriorate on the world stage throughout his presidency. He has been a threat to America's national security since day one when he started dismantling the border policies and almost immediately got us involved in the Ukraine war. He should have been ousted as a fucking national security threat when all the evidence started coming out a couple years ago about his involvement in these money laundering schemes and all the shady shit that he's been doing basically his entire career that should have resulted in him being impeached for fucking treason. But it's not just Biden. It's like our entire government administration and media and big pharma and all the elites that have been conspiring to ruin the country and establish global control. And it's like how we talked about last Friday. The MSM is instantly, they started throwing him under the bus before the debate was even over. And now there's this massive turning against him that was obviously pre planned. But I'm just so fucking disgusted that there isn't more outrage from the American public that our government has been trying to brainwash and indoctrinate us for years to become a nation of useful idiots who blindly follow whatever they tell us. And now suddenly, it's so shocking that Biden is incompetent and his abilities are being questioned. Like, it's a fucking joke. But off my soapbox and back to your theory about Mike Johnson, one of the things that I do think is interesting is, we have some of the Republican lawmakers, and I think even some Democrats, are calling for the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Biden from office. And Mike Johnson's playing this one very carefully because he basically said he doesn't agree with this idea, but he also said it's not the place for the Speaker of the House to call for that. So after the debate, he said, quote, "There's a lot of people asking about invoking the 25th Amendment right now because this is an alarming situation. Our adversaries see the weakness in this White House, as we all do. I would ask the cabinet members to search their hearts. I would be panicking too if I were a Democrat today and that was my nominee. I think they know they have a serious problem," end quote. And then he said, quote, "These are fateful moments. If I were in the cabinet, I would be having that discussion with my colleagues at the cabinet level. I would. We'll see what action they take. It's a serious situation," end quote. And you mentioned Steve Bannon because Mike Johnson was also very vocal about trying to keep Steve Bannon from going to prison. He's the one that authorized the House to file an amicus brief last week supporting Bannon's emergency repeal to the appeal to the Supreme Court. And Congress doesn't usually intervene in these kinds of cases. So I don't know. Does this information like support your theory and this is a
Yep,
possibility?
it absolutely does because have you ever seen the show House of Cards? Like
I
this
haven't.
is fucking Mike Johnson. Like, oh, the guy is so slick. It's like he's got this whole plan to become president without being elected. But of course he acts like, oh, I would never do that. I would never, and so Mike Johnson's gonna say, oh, I don't know about the 25th Amendment. Because if you're like, if that's your plan, you're not gonna like let the whole world know that. You're gonna be like, oh, we want to take this lightly and blah blah or seriously. And I think he's playing it off. And I also just I wonder about him and Steve Bannon. Like you and I had talked about this before we started recording, but he seems like so optimistic.
Yeah.
And if Mike Johnson were to be like the interim president, he would pardon Steve Bannon. So
Mhm.
it's like, I don't know, but it's very interesting. And the other point that Steve Bannon made was that he's certain in July they're going to sentence Trump to prison. He's like 100% calling it. And he thinks that that would be the only way Trump wouldn't win in a landslide. Because when you think about it, like there are a lot of moderate Americans that aren't going to vote for someone that's in prison. Therefore, at the Republican National Convention, they could go with another candidate like Mike Johnson. If he's already in place at that point, wouldn't that be, just the smart, safe thing to do? So, like, both of these theories are incredibly radical. I get that. And they're just theories. I'm just like pulling shit out of thin air. Okay. But we're in uncharted waters here. Like, there is no telling what's going to happen between now and November. Like, it could
Yeah,
be
and
anything.
it's shit. You're not really pulling shit out of thin air. It's all based on stuff that's happening.
Yeah, it's like if you just kind of read in between the lines and look at the whole picture, the whole, I mean, a year worth of planning. Like they've known for a long time Biden's going to lose and he's not mentally competent. So do we really think that all of a sudden, because of a 90-minute debate, now they're going to scramble?
Right. The debate that they said was never going to happen because Biden wasn't going to do debates.
But
And
then
then
they planned
Biden,
it.
right. And then they plan it because then Biden suddenly challenges Trump to a debate. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
And they plan it like before the conventions.
Mhm.
Like it's just I think they set up the whole thing. I think this has been in the works for a while and Mike Johnson could be in on it. I'm just saying it's all speculation, all my opinion. I'm just putting it out there. But something else interesting that I found that's going to be another hurdle Democrats are going to face is with the ballots in 3 swing states. So according to the Gateway Pundit, uh, quote, Wisconsin does not allow withdrawal from the ballot for any reason besides death. While in Nevada, no changes can be made to the ballot after 5 p.m. on the fourth Friday in June of an election year unless a nominee dies or is adjudicated insane or mentally incompetent. And in Georgia, if Biden were to withdraw less than 60 days before the election, his name would remain on the ballot, but no votes would be counted. So if the Democrats think that they're just going to swap him out, they better think again because these 3 swing states could make all the difference in who wins. So unless Biden dies, this would mean they'd lose Wisconsin and Nevada. And then they would have until the beginning of September to get the new person on the ballot in Georgia if they want it to count. And so here we have the Republican National Convention that's coming up in Milwaukee, July 15th through 18th, which, by the way, is just a few days after Trump's sentencing, which once again, it's like, hmm, that was that planned? And then the Democrat National Convention is a month later, August 19th to 22nd in Chicago. So very interesting. But I don't know what they would do about those swing states.
Well, you know what? When I was first looking at some of your notes on the Mike Johnson thing, I was like, this is crazy. After actually listening to you just now, I'm like, this actually makes a lot of sense. This is
You got to let it percolate.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we'll see. Like we are definitely living in unprecedented times right now. And there's so many theories about what might happen, but the bottom line is if the left loses the election, the elites are fucked. So you know they're going to pull every possible desperate play to make sure it doesn't happen and to keep Trump out of office. And like I still think their play will be Biden withdrawing or he's going to have some kind of accident or medical diagnosis that forces him out. Newsom will step in and then they'll rig the election and that way they can retain power and not only retain power but grow even stronger because it would allow Newsom to fully embrace his antichrist role and like fuck the whole country and basically the world. And the only way that we can stop this is to come together as Americans and support Trump and make sure that enough people vote that he has a landslide victory because you know there's going to be election fraud attempts. So it has to be enough votes that they can't commit any fraud. And like we've been saying this for what, the last 2 years, the most important, most critical election in our lifetime. And it's like do or die time for America right now.
That's right. We got to be too big to rig, as Trump says.
Mhm.
Yeah, so many things are going to be happening. We'll stay on top of all of it. So keep tuning in. We'll keep you posted as all of this is unfolding, and we'll see if my crazy theory pans out. I know it probably won't. I get that it's like very out there, but I mean, they are diabolical.
Yeah.
So you got to think like a crazy person would. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep everyone posted. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week. And we'll see you back here on Friday.